One of the things I've enjoyed most about this season of Wild Thing, besides all the cool space science, of course, is that everyone has different ideas about extraterrestrial life. We've heard from a fair number of scientists, some ufologists, a couple of authors, and some plain old science nerds. Today, we're going to hear from an artist. A few months ago, I went to an exhibit called Indigenous Futurisms. It was about cosmology and science as part of Native American tribal histories. There were a ton of cool and really thoughtful takes on science fiction from various Indigenous artists, including the one we'll hear from today, Frank Buffalo Hyde.
My name is Frank Buffalo Hyde. I am Onondaga Beaver Clan and Nez Perce. I was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I grew up on the Onondaga Indian Reservation in Syracuse, New York, and I spent the summers in Santa Fe, New Mexico with my father. And Santa Fe was home for 15 or 20 years, and then I moved briefly, and then I moved back there for 10 years, and now we're newly relocated to the upper Midwest in Minnesota. So
how long have you been doing art professionally?
Professionally, I had my first group exhibition when I was 18 in Armory Square in Syracuse, New York. I exhibited some charcoal drawings. So that's really when I kind of attribute the beginning of my career. So, a little over 25 years.
Okay. Wow. Nice.
Yeah. And my art is not what you would consider when you think about contemporary Indigenous art. A lot of work that I do, I deal with contemporary issues of appropriation and Indigenous identity, and at the beginning of the 21st century with popular culture and advertisement and social media. So I'm just, I'm just pulling from all of these influences that everyone is influenced with. And I really believe that it's the artist's job to document the time that they exist, and that's what I try to do with my work. And more, it's incorporating these themes of UFOs and paranormal activity, because I think our society is starting to look for things outside of itself. I'm talking about popular culture, not necessarily Indigenous people, but popular culture is starting to look for things outside of themselves these days, just because we've become so closed off with social media, and now with the pandemic, we're even more so. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So for one of the episodes, I went to the UFO Watchtower, which is in the San Luis Valley in Colorado. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's kind of a place of pilgrimage for a lot of people, and that they come and they leave an offering and they make a prayer, and there's been tons of UFO sightings there. And there's this sort of feeling that as society has become more secular and more removed from religion, that this interest in UFOs and extraterrestrials has supplanted that, the place that religion used to hold in society, which was kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, no, I think as human beings, we definitely have to believe in something other than ourselves, to guide us and to make us feel better about things that we just have no control over.
Yeah, and I learned about your art while I was walking through an exhibit at the Museum of Contemporary Native Arts in Santa Fe, and this included a painting that you did called Sightings, The Truth is Out There.
Right.
This is an audio interview, and I will post a photo of the art on Instagram, but for those who are listening, can you describe the painting?
Yeah, recently I've been working in a standard 48 by 48 canvas format. It lends itself well to sort of my recent bodies of work. And in the painting, there's sort of an earth tone background with a large mothership-looking flying saucer on top of the painting. And then on the bottom, there's a group of equestrian Indigenous riders. We're not sure, if they're a war party or not. And then to the left, there is a illustrative interpretation of Mulder and Scully from the X-Files. In between, there's lots of paint acrobatics happening along, splashes and drips and spray paint, and then some suggestion of redacted text, like if you were looking at top secret documents from the government.
What were you thinking about when you created this? What message were you trying to get across?
This is, I think, the second iteration of sightings that I've done. And the crux of the painting is that, with the imagery of the mothership and the war party, it creates a conversation whether the war party is being picked up or if they're being dropped off, or are they in league with the extraterrestrials, or are they against the extraterrestrials? This could have taken place 500 years ago, or it could take place 500 years from now. Really, just I wanted to convey a sense of time not being linear, and suggest a little bit of popular culture. Big X-Files fan. My older sister got me into that growing up, and so I always look for opportunities to include those paranormal references in my work.
Nice. What is it about the paranormal stuff that really interests you?
What really interests me about the paranormal and cryptozoology and all that stuff is the element of the unknown. It's very much like urban folklore history, but it's also very much like oral tradition. And there's a element of magic to it, but there's also, the people that have had encounters know that it's also part of their truth. So it's kind of like this collective knowledge of these things. Everybody has their own narrative that they bring to these situations and icons. What I really like about it is that as of yet, there's no concrete air quotes proof, but the people that are interested in it and follow it and usually have had some sort of experience, and so yeah, that's kind of why I'm drawn to it.
Yeah. Have you ever had a sighting or an experience, either cryptozoology or UFOs, aliens kind of thing that stands out to you, or at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have. I've seen things like in cemeteries. I've witnessed a UFO formation, that famous Phoenix sighting. I think it was in the early 2000s.
The Phoenix Lights or whatever it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw that formation, but in Santa Fe, like a couple days earlier, flying over the city. So I've definitely had experiences. Those are the ones that I commonly reference, and I've had other experiences that I choose to keep to myself, for sure.
Fair enough. Yeah, I have talked to a fair number of people, and I think a lot of them are wary about sharing those kinds of things because they just don't want to deal with being ridiculed or looked at with a kind of a side eye.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, that's not about that. When I was starting to read books about this and watch any sort of special that I could get my hands on, was like well over 20 years ago. I would have been like a young adult, preteen, teenager. And, back then it was still sort of like not really taken seriously, but in the 20 or so years after that, there's all of these people that, they're cryptozoologists. There's countless ghost adventure shows, and then there's paranormal shows or cryptozoological shows. So there's all of these things that are sort of lending a credence to that genre, to the to that sort of investigation. So it's I think at some point it's not going to be like as fairy tale-ish as it once was. I think they're sort of the paranormal, UFOs and cryptozoology is slowly working its way into the popular culture, the unconscious collective, if you will.
Yeah. So you've had your own experiences and your own sightings. Are there stories that are, that you've heard either from other tribal members or friends or sort of are part of Native American lore at all that have caught your attention?
Pretty much every indigenous culture has some sort of oral history about the Star People. These are people that exist beyond the terrestrial bounds of the Earth. Nothing really too detailed. I know I've heard firsthand encounters of people that are relatives of mine, and strange things that happened on the reservation. But also there's always those, you see these specials about the southwestern tribes that disappeared, like the Anasazi. I think that word is in the painting that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Underneath aliens, and people theorize, air quotes again, that they were star people and disappeared and went back into space with extraterrestrials. But there's always conflicting report. I mean, as much as people believe that, there's scientific evidence that they just probably migrated away to where the resources were more plentiful. But you never know. I always try to weigh the alternative explanations as well.
Yeah, and I mean the star people explanation seems like it's a lot more interesting than just migration.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
I know you don't have the caption of that painting right next to you, so I'm going to read it for listeners now. Modern archaeology attributes the loss of civilizations that have mysteriously disappeared to disease or war or famine. Many indigenous nations have stories that describe star people who come from the sky or another dimension. Is the war party being dropped off or picked up by the mothership? In many parts of the United States, as well as the rest of the world, Indians have taken on the mythological status of UFOs or Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. I want to believe. The truth is out there. So these are pretty popular sayings, and I've heard them a lot when I've been interviewing people about these subjects. Why did you choose to use these particular phrases?
It was just a nod to the X-Files. I mean, there's a whole generation that grew up with, the first iteration of the X-Files, and then they renewed the series like five years ago. And I think they had 2 seasons of that, and then there were the movies in between. And it's, if you say that, not everybody's interested in this kind of stuff. So, it's kind of a shorthand to get to those people that are. You mentioned those things, and people that know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, totally. So this is not the first piece of artwork you've done that pulls on the idea of extraterrestrials and UFOs. I saw another one online that has a group of buffalo being chased or followed by a cluster of UFOs. You can probably describe that a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, those paintings that you're talking about are part of a series that I started about 15 years ago called the Buffalo Field series. And the Buffalo Field literally was set up as an allegorical situation for North American history in my work. There are about 30 head of buffalo on my reservation, and I grew up occasionally helped tend to them, and it also was a social place for kids to hang out. It was kind of like, so I started this series called the Buffalo Field series. And when it first started out, there were just, very stagnant, situational portraits of the Buffalo Field, like in different times of the day, and with the different sort of multimedia collage as an underpainting. And they sort of evolved into these other paintings that I call Buffalo Fields Forever, Contact, or Buffalo Fields Forever, Bulls on Parade. This particular part of the series has the buffalo running out towards the viewer. And again, it's suggestive of are the buffalo being chased or pursued by the saucer? Are they being accompanied by the saucer? Were they just dropped off by them? Are they being picked up by them? I always want the viewer to be sort of questioning, are we looking at something that happened in the past, or what's going to happen in the future, or happens when you're not looking?
At what point did you start incorporating these ideas of extraterrestrials and aliens and UFOs into your art?
I've started incorporating those ideas almost immediately. Like, the first paintings I did were of, they were sort of abstract representations of maybe like alien figures with like big heads and big eyes. And I don't know exactly why that was. I mean, I just didn't have the tools to render the figure properly. But also I was looking a lot at primitive art. So when you start studying art and art history, you see a lot of people that are held up as 20th century masters, but a lot of them are being influenced by these indigenous cultures, like from the Ivory Coast and from the indigenous nations in North America and Central America. So you see a lot of this like generalized human form with the large head and the large eyes and the small body. So something with that just kind of like registered to me is like, instead of being primitive forms, they might be extraterrestrial forms.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's an interesting way to think of it.
Yeah.
Do you have other favorite paintings that you've done or pieces of art you've done that follow along this theme?
I think the one that's in the show is definitely one of my favorites, just because it's one of the pieces that embodies a lot of my different interests in one piece. And I'm always looking for like ways to do that. I mean, I think combining Western art and indigenous art with UFOs and the paranormal is, not a lot of people are doing it. And I think it's, there's a lot there. I mean, it's a rich sort of untapped genre that I look forward to making some more pieces about.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, with all the stuff that we're hearing about with potential for there being, microbial life on Venus, or they're sending these missions to Mars. Does any of the science news and any of that kind of information influence your thoughts on your art?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always, I think of it in terms of expansion, like colonization. So I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. We've not really treated this planet that well, and we're stretching out into the universe. And basically, what we're looking for is a place that we can habitate and then start, mining those planets for their resources. So, there's pluses and minuses with everything in technology, but I always reference like exploration and technology parallels the same ideas of Western expansion and colonization.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what are your thoughts on extraterrestrial life? Do you think it's out there? Do you think it's visited us? I'm curious what you think is out there.
I think there's way too much evidence. There's way too much credible sightings and documentation to discount that there aren't vehicles in our airspace, in our atmosphere, that are unidentified. Now, from their origin, I'm not going to, definitively say I know where it's from, but I think the human race would be arrogant to think that we're the only sentient beings in the universe, because if you take a look at the actual size of Earth and the grand scheme of everything, we are very minuscule. And I think it's human arrogance to believe that we would be alone and the only ones to be progressing or have technology. So I'll just leave it at that. I mean, I don't want to sound like the guy with the aluminum hat on, being afraid that someone's going to steal my thoughts, but I definitely do believe that we have been visited, and there continues to be evidence, of that continuing for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of very interesting and cool ideas that are percolating around this topic, and I felt like your art really spoke to that. I really enjoyed seeing that. So where could people go to see, if they want to see the kind of art you've done and get a good look at it? Is there a website? Do you have a Instagram account?
I have a website. It's just www.frankbuffalohyde.com. I also have an Instagram. It's at Frank Buffalo Hyde, and also my Facebook page is just my full name. It's Frank Buffalo, and my last name is spelled Hyde, Hyde. And then pretty much if you Google my full name and click on images or click on videos, I've had a few short videos made about my work, one for PBS and a couple for the collections I've been included in. The Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian has some of my work. as well as a couple other museums around the country, like the Autry Museum of the West and the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem. And thank you for, like I said, taking the time to check out my work online and then see the exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Native Art.
That was Frank Buffalo Hyde. He's an artist known for his work in contemporary Native American art, which has been exhibited nationally and internationally. You can see the painting we talked about today, Sightings, The Truth Is Out There, on the Wild Thing Instagram page, @WildThingPod. And if you want to see more of Frank's work, frankbuffalohyde.com. That's Hyde, Hyde. This podcast is a production of Foxtopus Inc. Our executive producer is Scott Carney, editing is by Alicia Lipinski Lincoln, and the score and sound mixing come from Louis Weeks. I'm your host and creator, Laura Krantz.